Hi everyone, this is David, and I want to welcome you to Module 1. Well, we've been in Module 1 for almost a week, so it's kind of this talk about Module 1, look forward to Module 2, but officially this is our Module 1 Fireside Chat. Now, the fire is going behind me in my electric basement fireplace. Actually, this is my basement office. We don't really have a finished basement though. There's laundry, furnace over there, and things. Just kind of my corner where I do my work. It's nice this time of year, but in winter, the basement is not heated, so it gets down to a thermometer over there, 55 maybe. So yes, that'll keep you awake. So first of all, thanks for a wonderful start to this class. You've been extremely dynamic, painted just a very vibrant portrait of your own lives through your student introductions, and I really appreciate that. I guess the honesty, also the adventure you've shared through your experiences. And in saying that, everybody has experiences which I've read and looked at photos, and it's like, wow, that's amazing. And as I'm reading that, as I'm thinking about that, I can imagine what you have to offer when you get to the classroom and working with students and making that connection and sharing your experiences with them and helping them build out their knowledge base. Just so many. I mean, it's hard to touch on. Everybody did a wonderful job. Caitlin, when I saw your photo of the not the Wisconsin River, of the Mississippi, it was so ironic because when I bike, there's a spot that I stop that overlooks the Wisconsin, and it's very, very similar to the photo that you posted. And it's an interesting location too, because it's located very close to Native American effigy mounds. So, but when I looked at that photo, I had to kind of look twice, and then I could see, I recognized it was from a different area, in the Mississippi. But yeah, really neat photo. So thanks for sharing. A few things. I'm hopefully always going to share some humor and perspective in this fireside chat. Some will be shorter, some will be longer. Hopefully you'll stay engaged and keep watching. But a few things. One is I was fortunate this week to receive my book deal with my publisher, and I have an agent. So it had been in the works, and my agent is a Pulitzer Prize winner, was actually the agent for Woodward and Bernstein, which goes back to Watergate and President Nixon, and he also is a movie producer. And I worked with him this summer on writing a movie, and then I also did directing. And we just kind of hit it off. He's basically the 70-year-old version of me, the 44-year-old me. So we have this sense of humor that we connect, and it's been a lot of fun. And I was fortunate that he offered to take the role of literary agent for me, because if you want to get published and don't want to self-publish, everything that I've heard, it's a pretty difficult thing to break into that kind of business if you don't have an agent, especially an agent that is well known. So that worked out really well, and I do have a 2-book deal with a 4-book option and maybe a 5-book option. And just in kind of lingo or whatever, you get a guaranteed advance, so you get a check up front, and then the way that it works is there's other titles that I have kind of developed, and then those have been retained by the publisher, and they can either, based upon how well my first few books do, and the first book has several $1,000s or several thousand advanced copies already sold, which is very good. Then they have the option to either buy that option from you and you write the book, they give you another advance, and or else they have a set fee, they can just buy it and that's it, it's done. Nothing happens with it, that you don't write it. But so it's very fun. I love to write. I actually wrote 2 books that I really never attempted to get published. One was when I was in college, about 500 pages long. I wrote it in summer. It was about the main character, Keith Reno. So we're talking a long time ago, but it was a pretty interesting. Typed it on my Apple IIe with the 5 1/4 floppy disk, but pretty interesting story, I thought. Some others thought too. And main character, Keith Reno, was going to school and living in an apartment, but he was doing this in the same town he grew up in. So he's going to college in the same, kind of large college in the same town that he grew up in. So you have this weird perspective where something is very familiar to your hometown all of a sudden kind of changes, because now you're seeing it from a student perspective, and you're becoming one of so many of these students that have never been in your town. And but it was completely a comedy, and I kind of wish I would have maybe done more with it or had it on a format. Right now, the only copy that exists of it is something that came off my Apple IIe printer, the old dot matrix. So it's like that thick in a closet over there, and I don't think anything would ever happen with that. But I think that set the seeds for. I wrote a book called Past Infringement, and actually got that into book form. That's a historical, nonfiction, fiction type book based upon the early life of Jefferson Davis. And he was here in Portage, where I live, at Fort Winnebago when he was 20. It's a fact. And I was a volunteer guide at Fort Winnebago for a number of years. And I did a lot of research and found a lot of links between Jefferson Davis and some very substantial other soldiers that had served at Fort Winnebago, and then they had significant roles in the Civil War. But crafted a pretty interesting story, and actually took it to a group of reenactors in Prairie du Chien, and I kind of pitched this story as if it was factual, that I had found it through research, and again, it's some of it's factual, some of it's fictional, but anyway. The whole premise of the story was, and you're like, why are you telling me this? Well, a little background about me, okay? I don't do this every time, but so the whole premise was that the Civil War was set to start in about 1830, but then the war with Texas, war for Texas, and the war in Florida, the Seminole War, and all these other things were kind of tying up the South, so the war could never get underway. And by the time it did, the North had developed to a point where they could thwart the South in the Civil War. But getting into the story of past infringement, it kind of talks about different connections Jefferson Davis had and efforts to try to start the Civil War much earlier than it actually happened. So one of the key areas too, as you go to Prairie du Chien, the history involved with that, but even in the War of 1812, that there was some activity that was going on there. So I pitched the story amongst some reenactors, and when you come in and you're a reenactor and you make your own clothes, and you really are in tune to the detail. It's like, hey Ted, you got your watch on. It's like, oh no. But they thought it was factual, and of course I told them it wasn't. But the reason I did that pitch, as you know, a few years ago, was just to see if an educated audience of that nature would believe that something supported with those type of pseudo. I mean, there were actual facts that were just put together, rearranged in a way that that supported that story. So anyway, past infringement, pretty cool story. And I have the book. That one actually I do have on modern format and stuff, but I don't know. That maybe someday it'll come out, maybe it won't. But the book that is being published is Lessons of Lower Manhattan, a Contrarian's Perspective of School Safety Situations. So that's the one the publisher is doing. And also, I believe the second one, and I believe this because we're kind of debating on the second book. I have a few titles out there, and one is Mending the Immortals, which is a book I'm very passionate about writing. It talks about the extreme trauma that we are doing to teachers, to principals, and students and parents by running these very dramatic school safety simulations, where you're running into a building and students are covered with fake blood and police are firing off dud rounds and stuff like that. So my position, in my professional position with my Ph.D. and my expert business cards, which are right here, arrived this week. So, which is good and bad, because I have a business that I do my consulting with that I think I'm going to let be absorbed by another business, which would then kind of make those cards obsolete. But I'm not for those types of simulations, because they're so far removed from what the truth of a active shooter or intruder event would be. And the trauma is incredible that is invoked by those types of drills. We don't light a garbage can on fire and put smoke in a hallway and have students run out for a fire drill. So you do this interagency, these big drills where fire, police, EMS get together. But the reality is that whenever there is a crisis situation, intruder situation, whoever's on duty is going to be coming in. And what's happened is an all-call goes out, so you could have up to 400 or 500 police officers from different agencies responding, fire, EMS. It's crazy, it's chaotic. Parents get text from their kids, something's going on in their school, they plug up all of the routes as you come in. But there are cases of teachers who go on disability because of the trauma of these drills. And also the message we're sending to students when we go and do those types of things. Now, I have ways that I work with districts and I prepare districts, and when I get into Lessons of Lower Manhattan, without getting too much into that, if you go on Google and you type in boat lift plus 9/11 plus Tom Hanks, okay? There's an 11-minute video that comes up, and it talks about how on September 11th, 2001, there were 500,000 people rescued off of Lower Manhattan, and it was all done largely by people, fishermen, tour boats, just a few Coast Guard boats, but just people coming together in the moment and getting one directive: do what you have to do to save lives. So the fact that wasn't pre-planned allowed people to use their tacit knowledge, people with sense making, and then be very able to adjust to the changing context and situation. Had you not done that, my premise is that would have been a chaotic disaster. There's other examples of things like that. The evacuation of Dunkirk in World War II, which had a large civilian component. in the evacuation of Saigon, Operation Frequent Wind, 1975. There were so many people being evacuated that some of the ships, the Navy ships, were actually starting to sink. And one of the commanders said, push everything overboard. So the soldiers, the sailors would be out there and they'd be pushing helicopters overboard, planes, things like that, and to lighten it and to make room for people. And that commander was issued a citation commending that decision. So anyway, why get into this and why I kind of build off on some of that stuff is when you talk about inclusion, I don't want you to follow a path that is the path of inclusion, because I don't think that exists. I think it's different in every situation, in every context. And if you start to think that inclusion is scripted and prescribed, what you actually do is you end up more in the camp of mainstreaming. And that's not where I want you to be. So here's an example that hopefully makes this a little clear. So a few years ago, a school district around my area took the approach that they were going to become full inclusion. Here's how they did it. School started just like it did in the past week. A couple in-service days before, superintendent comes in and says, hey, we're going to be fully inclusive this year, which means that all students with disabilities are going to be served in the regular education classrooms, that we will not have special education classrooms. Special education teachers will be team teaching, co-teaching, whatever. And that was that. So, of course, you need common planning time for successful co-teaching or team teaching. You need a lot more development to go into this. Why this was happening was the school had grown. They outgrew the facilities and they needed classroom space, and this was the approach the superintendent took to get there. What actually happened then is you had students with disabilities who were physically in the environment with non-disabled peers, but were not included. Meaning that planning hadn't been done to include them in the curriculum, to engage them, to design the rooms so there might be areas for student to stand at a standing desk, or to sit in a beanbag for sensory, or to use fidget items, whatever it might be, and how looking even ecologically at the room. For students with hearing loss, would you use an FM system just so you amplify the sound for everybody? But none of that had been done. So that's mainstream. That's just putting students in a environment with peers. It's not including them with peers. It's not connecting them to the curriculum. It's physically putting them in the environment. And you can take a class like this, and it can go down one of two routes. And one is that you become more of an inclusive thinker, or one is that the class can have a mainstreaming emphasis. And what I want to do is have that inclusive approach to this class. So when I share these stories with you, I try to frame it. When I think about things and what I share with you, I'm like, how does this relate to inclusion? So I will try to put that in my responses to your work also. From the perspective of inclusion, your post adds to that, by highlighting these points. So I had some books come in this week, and not everything's going to kind of be like this, but it's like my intro. We had the intro video, but now I know each of you from your post, and I want you to know a little bit more about me, and then, as we go on, it probably won't be like this, but again, we don't have the aspect of the context of a face-to-face environment, so I do want to tell you more about me, and hopefully, that this is rapport building, and there's things, and hopefully somewhat, it's not exciting, but hopefully it's not boring. a few things is I had some books come in this week. I enjoy reading, and one of the things being a school safety expert, where again, working at the level I do, nationally and kind of beyond, is you need to keep very much on top of what's out there as far as literature, and then also kind of the top people in the field and making connections. So it doesn't stop. Here's the book Sully, that just came out, and which has to do with the aircraft landing on the Hudson, and why I think this is, well, first of all, it's very important to me for safety, because one of the things that I know in working with my connections with NASA, it's very scripted of how safety is when you're flying a plane. You're supposed to go through checklists if something happens, and typically, if you're in a situation, you can try to run through these checklists and not make it to the end before something catastrophic happens. So that was the thing, in the book of Sully, and of course coming out in the movie, of saying, if we would have tried to return and land at the plane, we wouldn't have made it. And that was a point of contention between, the airline and between the captain. So, but independent analysis said, yeah, absolutely the right thing to do, the water landing. Now, in inclusion, in classrooms as a special education teacher, you probably found this, you're going to find this, or even as a regular education teacher, you're going to have to make decisions which might fall out of the mainstream. Now, use mainstream just before, but might fall out of what's popular for a student with a disability. Here's an example. A district, again, that I worked with embraced inclusive practices, a very thoughtful district, and then one day in May, as they started to prepare for graduation, realized that 2 of the 5 top students who would be graduating and up for scholarships were students with disabilities. And this started to bring forward some questions of, well, those students had accommodations, they possibly had pass or fail grading, possibly. Should they count on the top 5, should they be counted in there? And it basically started to sift itself into two sides before the principal, who was very strong unifier, and the counselor and some key teachers, both special education and other teachers that did not teach special education, came forward and said, if a student with a disability or without a disability is ranked number 2 in our school, it's the fact of having the disability is irrelevant as far as ranking. Let's celebrate the student and what they've been able to do, because they knew that the school knew that it provided rigor. It was very confident in that. And that was a key point, because I remember being in a staff meeting where the principal had said that this really brings forward the question of, are we giving all of our students rigor? Because if we don't think we're giving all of our students rigor, then the issue isn't that we have 2 students with disabilities in the top 5. The issue is that we aren't challenging all students to the level that they deserve to be challenged. Think about that. So. But again, so I look forward to reading this book, and this book, The Metis Principle by Brian Peters. I've read this one. Actually, I just had it returned by a friend. But this book, basically, the Metis Principle says that Maslow's hierarchy is incorrect. Parts of it are incorrect. That the number 1 driving force is fear. That is the number 1 innate need per the Metis Principle. So, Brian, I had lunch with, he's a professor in Milwaukee. I had lunch with him last summer. Very, very insightful And what the book does is, the book's a little ahead of its time. Brian uses wonderful examples. This is really going to be one of the footholds in how to work with children in a trauma-informed school, because a lot of those students have lived with high amounts of fear for either short amounts of time, or kind of perpetual moderate level fear. And fear, meaning is, when I get home tonight, am I going to be told that we have to move somewhere else? If I open up the cupboards, will there be anything there? Even when I interviewed people when I was doing my dissertation, and some of the things that are in my published dissertation, would be homes in one district where teachers would visit the homes and the cupboards didn't even have doors, and they would talk about the fear of the students of just what happens if, again, what happens if I get home tonight and we're told, mom says we have to move, or mom and dad or whatever says we have to move, or if there's violence or violent neighborhood, things like that. So it's very good, because when you think about inclusion and understanding the background, understanding fear, and working with people who live in environments of fear, so when they come in your classroom, they make a connection with you. It's not going to happen right away, but that family makes that connection with you. So very good. It's different, much different than the work of Ruby Payne. So there's really nothing like this out there, and it's not specifically a school book at all. But it does have things in there about classroom management here on page 114 and so forth. But The Metis Principle by Brian Peters. Very interesting stories Brian shared. I'd love to be able to share them, things that didn't make the book, but that he left out for the respect of some of the people that he interviewed. Even though they gave him permission to use the stories, it would just have been too compromising for the groups of people that shared those. So another book, Staying Alive, How to Act in Fast and Survive in Deadly Encounters. Be reading The Unthinkable, Who Survives When Disaster Strikes and Why. I critique a lot of books too. I did like 10 last week. The Miracle of Dunkirk, Walter Lord. So this is about the World War II rescue, which a lot of people compare the 9/11 rescue to. This took twice as long, was about half as many people, but had a civilian base and was also in a very uncertain context. 1 cent for this, plus $3 shipping. So, but the interest, it's very interesting for me. Now, let's, you're teaching middle schoolers or high schoolers. You're using this book. You can use it to teach inclusion. Why? Think about it. When the aircraft went down, the rescue, it was not based upon were you rich, were you poor, what the color of your skin was, what your ethnicity was. It was a community of sailors, of rescuers coming together, and then also the people that were on the plane coming together to support each other. And that is phenomenal. It's very much detailed, and it also shows you how to be a leader in fostering that type of collaboration across different, people with differences in a very dynamic situation, which Sully did. And this might be something where this might be out of tune with what your administration is telling you to do. But what I'm saying is use literature whenever you can. There's wonderful books out there. My Friend Will by Tara Tuchel, talking from the perspective, Tara is a teacher, wrote it with a student, and the student, so it's, I don't know, it's elementary age, but the student talks about her friend Will. Will has autism, and then what autism is, what her perspective of autism is, Will's value as a friend, value to the class. There's so much out there. But when you get into some of our projects, such as the Bill Porter project, and you talk about how you educate students about disability awareness and so forth, think of things like My Friend Will, or if you're a teacher of students that are older, maybe you talk about a book like this, like Sully, and just frame it from an inclusive perspective. Put that in the laps of students and say, what are the inclusive messages in that story, in that book. This is a $40 digital recorder, and one of the things I do now, and maybe it's because I'm older, is I record all of my phone messages with my agent and with the film studio and stuff, because these are my notes. So you're like, Dave, you're great at hieroglyphics. And I'm like, no, this is English. This is not. So something too that I recommend, the universal design for learning. So one of the things you can do for this class is, if you want to do your Bill Porter plan and you want to record it and have it as an audio file and send it to me that way, I'm fine with that. That's not a problem. What I will do, don't make it as long as this video, but 15, 20 minutes, I'll listen to it. And what's cool about that is it's a universal design for learning. It's different ways that students can demonstrate learning. It's divergent. And I don't want, if you want to write the paper, but if you want to do the Bill Porter plan and record it and then submit it, that's A-okay. Imagine then you have this is something that you could share with teachers on a thumb drive. It's something that they could access off of iTunes, or you could put it on a district drive. But now, if it's something that's on a thumb drive or iTunes, or you can download onto your phone or MP3 player, whatever it is, iPod, you can listen to it in the car during the commute. Think about that. So maybe you want to do a YouTube video. No one has done that. And I think that would be pretty cool about the Bill Porter plan. And it could just be something like this. And maybe what you do then is you bring in things and say, if I record the lectures, or if Bill does this, he uses something like this, it's $40, it plugs right in, or he could use his phone, and phones which now can record voices and can actually take speech to text. Now Bill is dysarthric, or a slurred speech, so that would work. But if someone was talking and you want to translate it down, that could work. But yeah, maybe you should say, hey, we're going to have this a bit available, so Bill can record his lectures and he can listen to them when he wants to. And we're also going to give Bill the opportunity to type in a text-to-speech program, and then maybe have that present out as one of his assignments, or use Powtoons, make cartoons, or whatever it be. But so just, you are the class that is going to do this. The previous classes have been wonderful, but again, people kind of more traditional with typing and things like that. But I get the feeling that the students here, us, you're going to push the boundaries, and I like that. So if something is way out there, and I don't think it matches what I was asking for, I'll let you know, and we'll do it in a different way. But if you're like, you want to do something like that, or you come up with something else, go for it. Go for it. So Couple things is one is I have my orange on, my Portage orange. I took my 6-year-old daughter to the Portage hosting Reedsburg football game last night. Now, Cyver, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Rundhog. When I was the special education director in Reedsburg from 2007 to 2009, and then had left to go to DeForest, but there was a Mrs. Rundhog, who was a kindergarten teacher, I believe, at Pineview. Not sure if that's any relation to you. So, learned a lot from her. She was all the teachers, but she very, very, very effective teacher with the young children. So. But unfortunately for Portage, they did not get the win. They lost 20-14, and this is also the school color at the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired. So it is my sole orange shirt. So it does dual purpose of supporting Portage and WCBVI. But yes, good game. So kind of torn. I have a lot of friends still in Reedsburg, and of course cheering for Portage. We live 2 blocks from the football field, so it's nice, and you can just walk down and walk back. So something funny today, very funny. So I just have this over here. Oh wow! All right, ream of computer paper, so not an ad for Georgia Pacific, but so we did our Walmart shopping, which we do on Saturdays, and the person doing the checkout was a young lady who I would guess still in high school, probably 17, 18 years old, and as she's checking out, it says something that struck me as extremely funny. And she picks this up and scans it, and she looks at me and said, "Would you like me to put this in the bag, which it will certainly rip through, or do you just want me to leave it out so you can take it?" Which is already saying, don't make me put this in a bag because this thing is heavy, and of course it's going to rip right through. But she said it in such a flat delivery that it was so funny. So I started to laugh, and she laughed too. And I said, I'll just carry it, be fine with that. But those kinds of moments in life, you can't get too serious to the point where you don't recognize in the moment just the gifts of humanity to one another. So I had lost a couple of friends in a very short time to cancer, and who are my age. One was a therapist that I worked with on my first job. Just a wonderful, wonderful man, and very kind, and had leukemia, went into remission, and then came back, and he had made his peace with what was going on, but very, very sad, of course, and he had a great sense of humor, and then also I lost another friend from cancer, and had visited her, and she was deteriorating pretty rapidly, was in her home, had a hospital bed by a window so she could look out, and again, these are people my age, and so I visited her, and when I had left, and this was about a year ago, but as I had left, she said, "Don't come back," and paused, and she said, we had a great day, she said, and we emailed, and we just had this sense of humor too of going back. Everything was so funny for years, and she said, we had so much fun today, and you and my family and stuff, and but I'm not going to be. This was one of my best days in a long time, and things are progressing, and I don't want you to remember me in any other way than today, and kind of a cool thing, and just kind of a real weird feeling too. So yeah, when she did pass, I thought about that. But yeah, it's never taking yourself too serious, and life too serious, and also being very open to what's going on around you and recognizing what's happening in the lives of your students and the lives of your coworkers, to do that. So I want to give some shout outs. So Daniel, you talked about the goals of public ed, and in that post you mentioned the agenda of outsiders. I did make a response to that. But one of the things with inclusion is you do get outsiders and insiders. And I think that comes back to being based upon that METIS principle. I worked with an excellent teacher who had been a teacher for over 20 years. We had a very, very high need student move in and this was not in my recent employment, this was a while ago. Had a student move in with very complicated needs, higher needs than the district had seen before. And this teacher suddenly kind of pulled back and actually was very reluctant to schedule the student, and it was just very odd. So the principal had kind of mentioned too of this, he thought this person was going to kind of be one of the leaders because she had so much experience and just was so good at what she did, and it was so much out of character. And I remember being present when she admitted a day or two later that she said, I feel really bad. I haven't been sleeping. Here's what's going on. I want to serve this student. I just don't know how. The needs are overwhelming me, and I need help, And so it was fear. It was fear because she said, I don't want to do the wrong thing. The student needs my help, and I want to make sure that what I do is right, and I'm not sure. I just haven't had, we're a smaller district, I haven't served these type of needs. And for her to say that was what probably all of us were feeling. And we knew, though, if we stayed together, worked as a team, and probably brought in a couple specialists to help us out, get started, that we'd be okay in working with the previous district. And we were. And for me, that was a very good learning moment as an administrator, to be observant of when people kind of act out of their normal kind of professional realm and pull back, that you can interpret that as being, I have too many students on my caseload or whatever, but what it probably is it's just, and we all feel this of, I'm not sure how, I don't know what to do. This is new to me, and we have so many things that are new. I mean, anxiety is the #1 growing thing right now for medical diagnosis of kids, as an aside. But how many of us have been trained in working with students with anxiety disabilities? So, I mean, so that is something. If you feel that way, it's normal. It is normal. I feel that way too. I mean, I'll have students that I'll work with that I just need to seek out people. I have a great team, but I need to seek out people who are more familiar with that, and then try, learn, and down beneath the orthotics and the hearing aids and things like that is there's a heart, and there's a student that needs you, and a family that needs you, and go for it. Have fun. Work hard with that student. Try things. If they don't work, try other things. But don't pull back because of that fear factor. And I've been there. So this isn't a lecturing thing from David to you. I've been there. I have completely been there and overwhelmed. Work with your team. And, too, I've also seen principals who put together a schedule and say, okay, at 4th grade we have 5 teachers, and this teacher works great with students with disabilities, so I'm putting all of the highest need students in her or his class, which is going, first of all, which is being done for convenience of the administrator and is going to burn out that teacher. It's something like that. The other teachers need to say, no, we need to make sure that all of us are serving all of our students. But your agenda made me think about that, and then of course school boards don't understand the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act and the cost sometimes of serving students with special needs, and can say things that can quickly be blown out of proportion. So it's important, I think, as a special education teacher and or regular education, to present to the board and talk about how you're serving students and the types of needs students present with that in your classroom, and then how you're meeting those needs. Because boards, they don't know that. You assume that they do, they don't. But you can do them such a favor by working, meeting with your superintendent, principal, and saying, we'd like to do a presentation to the board for 15 minutes. And the board will love it. And it'll give them a context, and they'll have a greater relationship with what you're doing. So, let me see. Well, Cyber, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Again, I loved your post about being on the top of the silo now, or hay mow, I'm not sure, didn't grow up on a farm, but I'm looking out and seeing fox, and we don't connect kids with nature. And Caitlin, many of you, I can tell from your pictures and what you're sharing is you're very connected to nature. In addition to experiences, trips you've taken and things like that, which increase this knowledge and experiential base that you have. But kids do not have that connection to nature. So when Cyber, when you're telling that story, imagine then that there's a field trip where you can take kids out to the farm and show them things like that, and show the context in soil, and you can work it into lessons of testing of pH for soil, and if we were here, everybody working together, how would that look like? How would we, who would plant, who would harvest? How would we design things if we were to make this a community and things? Just kids lose that. Nature is part of a community. Nature is part of inclusion, and make sure you bring that to kids, because a lot of studies will show that kids in cities might get what is considered nature experience in maybe 5-10 minutes a month, literally. Where it's something like walking through a park or whatever, not even in the woods or in fields. Yet, Viterbo hosted a national presenter on the need to have students connected with nature. Even if that's planting a garden in back of your school, or in some schools in the inner cities, planting it on the roof. But to do things like that, and to bring in, listen to bird calls, whatever it might be. But I guess as I'm saying this, when I'm talking about inclusion, we're talking about inclusion, students to students, students to environment of the school in the context, and students to that global environment of the environment that sustains all of us. And for some of you then in working in parochial schools, the faith environment will come through more also. And so, But cyber, so you got it. You got to write a book. You take these things down, and I mean, I think everybody in this class could write a book. I was just so interested in Caitlin telling that story of and showing the pictures of a river, and you can then talk about let's talk about how a river is inclusion. What lives in a river, and then lives together, and then there's so much, or even visiting a river. But anyway, I wanted to talk about in Module 1. So Module 1, I've already talked about inclusion versus mainstreaming. So it's kind of the foot in the water about what is inclusion, and again the history of a turbo, because that indicates a very inclusive environment that needed to calibrate itself to changing context and situation. For example, first being all female, then being co-ed, and just such an integral part of the community based on servant leadership. So I think it's a very special place, and it's a place when you come out of a turbo, you already have kind of an inclusive philosophical knowledge that you will use within the classroom. So the goals of public ed, we talked about this week, or this module 2, and there's this phenomena that's happening right now in public education, which I call the collision of galaxies, which would be a great book title. If you jump to it and copyright it before I do, it's all yours. But here's what I mean. We have the Individuals with Disability Education Act, which is basically special education law. Students with disabilities deserve a public education and deserve challenge of rigor. So individual and a range of services, meaning everything from full inclusion, which is where you should start, no matter what the needs of the child are, that you have this session. Can we educate this child completely in the regular education classroom? Okay, if we can't, if we added these accommodations and supports, can we? Okay, we can't. Then maybe part-time there, part-time pull-out, and you kind of work your way all the way down to the other side of the spectrum, which is maybe we have to educate the student in a setting that's not even in their district. But that range of services. So when school districts say we're full inclusion, that's actually not in alignment with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which says you have to have a range of services for all students. So we have this over here, Individuals with Disability Education Act. And then over here, so this is the Milky Way. Here's the Andromeda and the Adromeda galaxy. Now first of all, we know these two are going to collide in a few billion years anyway, which is bad news if you don't know that. So I have to be the one to bring that to your attention. I've dealt with it, and but yes, we're down to I don't know how many billions of years, and we will have our galaxy colliding with another one. So make the most of life till that happens. But no child left behind is over here. This is the Andromeda. Milky Way is Idea, and they're going to collide. No Child Left Behind is saying, hey, we want all students in the regular education setting. We want them to take tests that aren't modified. We want them to take the ACT. We expect every child's going to graduate and go to a college or some post-secondary training that they're going to be employed. So as much as that is everybody's goal, but this is what NCLB, which has been reauthorized and rebadged as every student succeeds or whatever it is, but it's basically the modern version of NCLB. So you have these two which are they're heading together. They're heading towards collision at incredible pace. Now, it's not going to be the billions of years it's happening right now. I think once we get past the election, the presidential election, whoever is our next president, and with the Department of Ed, this collision is going to happen within the next 8 years. It's somehow one is going to overtake the other. I don't think it's going to be this symbiotic merging of the two. I don't think that's going to happen. And I do think idea is going to prevail, and I do hope that it does. But if it doesn't, and special education gets weakened, I'm not sure what that's actually going to look like for inclusion. What it might be is, hey, all students will be attending school, it's just we're not going to be giving you the federal dollars to support these students and their needs and accommodations. It's just going to come out of a flat funding that you're going to get, which is then going to kind of create this us versus them, which we don't want. So we want the government, we want equity. So again, if you need to buy a special piece of equipment for a student, and when you talk about a student, that's one thing. If I talk about, I'm saying my daughter, that's a different thing. So it's also easy to take the context away from talking about students with special needs. Don't do that. Keep a context. I met yesterday with a friend. She's just getting into the phase of her writing her Ph.D., the actual paper. And we sat down and she's doing some interviews of students, and she asked me, should I just put student A, student B, student C? I said, no. I said that the moment you do that, that takes away the context for the reader. We're not numbers, we're not letters. Use a pseudo name, so Jill or Carlos, whatever, Sarah, whatever it might be, but then describe that person a little bit. Ask them, tell me about you. That's your first question. It's not just going whatever. Give a context, because build that context with the reader. Make that person real. They're not just an A, they're not a B, C, a 1, 2, 3. During Module 2, and I'll open the module up a few days in advance, you'll be introduced to more discussion on the history of inclusion and a very special person, Ro Vargo, who is in your book. You'll read about Ro and her self-determination, and then also the people supporting Ro, and also the challenges around Ro, but it's phenomenal. And, dun 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 dun, a few things I have at the end here. I know I'm getting up to the 1 hour mark, which is very long for a fireside chat. So download this, hey, rip it to MP3, listen to it in your car. But, so the history, here's something when I talk about, I want you to take this class and make it your own. Make it so it fits your needs, it benefits you, to make you a better educator, regardless of what you do. I mean, if you're a chemistry teacher, if you're Title I, whatever it is, we tend to think, again, these set roads, these set paths. I watched a documentary very recently. It was about the newest Navy ships that are being built, and they were, showing the helm, and where steer the ship. Okay, you obviously know that I don't own a boat by this point, but so they were asking the person doing the interview or whatever, the documentary, saying, why are there open spaces? This is designed kind of odd. Why is there like the radar here and then there's like nothing here and then there's something over here and computer stuff over here? And they said, that's because what's going to go there, that will be invented in 30 years. What'll go there, that'll be invented in 40 years. Life of the ship is like 60 years. And think about it. Yeah, think about it. So, when we think about inclusion and what inclusion means, inclusion is going to be a lot different even in 10 years when we have things, already like cell phones Well, if you need to, if you need to dictate, for example, something, well, in the past you had a tape recorder or whatever, but now you can do it on your phone. I mean, you can get notes for a class on your phone. You can use the phone as a calendar and a reminder. These would all have been IEP goals 10, 15 years ago. A student will use a calendar. And they're still using it. It's just integrated. It's part of what everybody has. And these things are becoming so linked to universal design for learning and just so accessible. But who knows what this is going to look like in 10 years and what we can access through the internet. It's liberating in the point of, do we really have to teach the names of the 50 states anymore? First of all, I can't tell you the names of the 50 states. No, okay. All right, you'd be like, Dave, you don't know. Okay, I know the 50 states. I could probably come up with that. But do I know the state capitals? No, I don't know the state capitals. I don't know all the state capitals. But do I know how to go on the phone and do a search and find state capitals? Yeah. So we talk about inclusion. A lot of the stuff that we're spending time on of teaching wrote facts, wrote knowledge, wrote procedures, boom. Don't worry about it. It's going to be done. You have to know how to use the technology to do that and say, well, what if the technology's not there? Yeah, that's what they said about the calculator too, okay? We're living in the world of technology, but freed up and liberate then people to your students to problem solve, to be divergent on how to work together, use different people's strengths, to come up with solutions to all kinds of things that are presented in their everyday lives. And I think it's going to give an opportunity when we talk about inclusion. I think we are heading into right now an era of inclusion which is going to focus a lot more on empathy and the social connections. I think we're going to have the time for that. Even though they're saying, Dave, that's crazy, all the stuff that's coming down with testing and all of that, true. And I think we're getting again to a point where that's probably as far, the pendulum probably has swung as far as it's going to go on that. But the technology is going to start freeing up some of those things. And people are going to look at curriculums. You are going to look at curriculums and say, you know what? I don't need to teach this as much as I need to teach how to access it. And then if you can access it, yeah, then how are you going to apply it and whatever. But I just say that because I remember when I was in school, we spent a week on learning the state capitals. And I think I missed like 2. So, but yeah. That's it. You're like, Dave, that's it? That's only an hour. Come on. I can promise you the Fireside Chats are not going to be this long if you consider this to be oppressive that it was an hour plus. Now, we do cover a longer amount of time, so I'm giving this, and the reality is, the modules are 2 weeks long, and the lesson's 4 weeks long, so realistically, if we were in class together, we'd have several hours. But I do want to share my perspectives and take what you've given, which has been great, and expand upon that and connect it, because I believe I owe that to you, and I'm just so impressed by what you have shared to this point, which is early, but I'm so impressed by each of you. You're really grounded in the right place, and I'm going to share something here. I did share that exact statement with some other faculty members and friends, now without, of course, indicating who any of you are, but collectively and individually, you really have. You know who you are, and you have such a passion to lead and to educate and to do the right thing. You're going to be wonderful. So, like for me, my daughters are in 5th and 1st grade. I'm like, we have teachers like you coming into the field, and how privileged these children will be to have you as teachers, as coaches. So, and how about my post about the building, baseball field and the parking lot, Field of Dreams? So, okay. But I remember actually visiting the Field of Dreams, which probably many of you have done. I did it before it was all commercialized like it is now, pretty within a couple of years right after the movie. But I remember being out there, and there were people like playing regular baseball games. Like, they bring their own stuff, and so you could be out there like, quick, take my picture, and then like, a ball comes by you at 90 miles an hour, like in the outfield. Like, whoa. So, kind of dancing around. One of the things that I need to do, so when I initially got into film, this is something too that is, I think is very important when you work in inclusion and work with students, is that students evolve, you evolve as a teacher, people evolve. Like, I'm 44. When I was 43, 40, I never thought I'd be working in film. I never thought I'd be working with a Pulitzer Prize winning, producer. I mean, it's crazy. And California, understanding how that stuff goes. It just, the opportunities open up, and they'll open up for kids, they'll open up for you. So use your life experiences now, recognize them, and then recognize the opportunities that those life experiences create for you. I didn't seek any of this stuff out. People found me because of the things that I had done, the paths I had taken in life, the experiences. And I'm having a blast with it. It is so much fun. And I need to do another screen test. One of the things, because some of the films, I wasn't in the first film, I had the option, I declined. But now I might be in some of the films I work in during the summer. And if I'm in those, you have to have a screen test and things where basically they put you in front of an audience, or do a screen test. You have to have it memorized. You've probably seen these things like on Seinfeld. I think they had an episode where they were doing screen testing, and then I have to basically, hey, someone did improv. I forget who it was offhand, but I have to, do 3 to 5 minutes, and then basically you are rated on that by just people in the Screen Actors Guild, whatever, and then you're okay to go ahead and be a participant in movies to play certain parts. So who knows where that'll go, but I've always kind of wanted to do that. I declined the first time out of respect. I didn't think it was the right thing to do when I was just coming in brand new. I was offered a small piece, and there are people who are key grips, and just the people that work on the sets and everything like that don't get those opportunities, and I think I need to kind of earn my wings before I could do that. But now would I do it? Yeah, I think I would. Little part. So thank you so much for being in this class, and please check periodically, every 2 days, I would hope. You log in, see the posts are on the right hand side, the posts that have been made. Make sure you're getting your post in. Make sure that you're checking the checklist boxes for the modules, because you do get points for those. If something shows up weird in the checklist box, like you look and it's like, okay, this is due January 8th. I have everything correct in there, make me aware of it, but there was a glitch in Moodle the last time they updated it, and I think it was tied to Windows 10 or something, and it was the last class I taught a month ago, where some of the dates were getting a little mixed up. But as long as you follow the module, what I have in the module, and I have in parentheses after this saying this is due on this date, September 20th or whatever, that's fine. You're set with that. If something shows up in the actual checklist, it's a little different. Disregard that, because it'll be really wacky. It'll be like January or something. That's something Viterbo knows about. They probably already fixed it, but it's not. You can let me know. I can let them know again. And please be very honest in your posts, like you've been doing. And if you have questions, you can share. If questions about the class, there's that thread up above, like how do I check how many posts I have? You might put something like that. Anyone can answer. Questions for me, questions for each other. If you text me, that's the best way to get a hold of me. If you text me and say, hey, I just sent you an email, could you check it? Most times I can do that within just a couple minutes. So we're off to a great start, and we have a nice pace to the class. I will open up the second module. Let's see, it starts September 11th, so probably maybe around the 9th I'll open it up. So when you go in, you'll see it. It'll be there. So module 1 will be down below, module 2 will be here. And then as we go on, I'll keep opening up the modules. If you don't have the book, you're going to need the book for the second module, so make sure that you order the book. And I let the bookstore know if they don't have it, go on Amazon or go on eBay and order it used. So, and for my at Mauston, actually, when I was a CISA 5, I worked with the Mauston schools quite a bit, and so I have a connection actually with quite a few of you in some very indirect ways. But very much appreciated my time in Reedsburg. I was there during the Great Flood, where the water went right over the bridge in town, and flooded out South Elementary completely, destroyed the basement. We had to gut that entire thing, dumpsters and dumpsters and dumpsters and dumpsters. And just what a horrible experience for families that was. And the strength of the community to rally and to come back. And I remember FEMA came in and took over the high school and Pineview. And I have pictures of that. And when FEMA comes in and takes over a school building like that for a disaster, you basically are given a notice of it, and that happened when school is not in session. You have a few hours and that's it. It's their building. And I had a special pass to get in. They have guards with guns at the doors, because when people come in after they've lost everything, it can be a pretty tense situation when they're asking for help. Now, people were wonderful in doing that, but I'll never forget that. I still have my pass. It's in that drawer. I'm a minimalist. I don't keep a lot of things, but I did keep that because it did represent just that fragile time for so many people, and just how a community comes together. So, but wow, I mean, that was an experience. The pictures I have from that, and for those of you in that area, never forget that. So, all right, I will keep you posted. So, Lessons of Lower Manhattan will be coming out in September of 2018. No, it's not a sales pitch. I don't tie my books to my classes. I have a Google ad account, and I think it's up to like $29 now. I've had it for 8 years. So it's like every month it goes up by a nickel or something like that. So I'm like, yay! When I'm 70, I'll get my $100 minimum check out of that. But I don't monetize my Fireside Chats or anything like that. But this is a great time of year. Make sure you're spending it enjoying nature, enjoying the changing leaves, getting out, doing walk, bike, whatever, enjoying time with friends, family. I look forward to what you post in Module 1 and looking forward to Module 2. So again, timeline for inclusion is due in Module 2. There's an example posted. It's a PowerPoint. You don't have to do that. If you can do a PowerPoint, you could do the timeline toast or whatever it's called. You could do a video, an audio presentation. You can do a play. You can do a one-person play. You can do a multi-person play. I don't use whatever you want, but convey the points. It's nothing to be taken lightly, but use whatever you want to convey it. Shoot a YouTube video. Hey, go for it. So yeah. What's kind of cool is, okay, no one's done this. Now, if I say this, everyone's going to do it, but no one's done the history of inclusion from the perspective of personal communication devices, cell phones. So, first phones, whatever, and then eventually flip phones, and you got to the point where you could text, and then where the text could be read, and then you could have photos, and now you can go into the program called Cam Scanner for free, and you can take photos of things, and it'll OCR text it. So if something's written on a board and read it off for you. QR codes, how those have made things accessible, that you can record video directions, things like that, but whatever. So, all right. Thank you, and go Portage. Traditionally, we've won in football maybe 1 or 2 games a year, And I'm hoping this is the year we turn the corner. If not, always appreciate the effort the players and the coaches put in, and love to be able to watch high school football. Nothing better than the Badgers beating LSU. But yes, so thank you so much, and take care.